everybody, this is Jake. Welcome back to the official Plugged In Vodcast. I'm Jake, as I said before. Just wanted you to know.
Not less than Jake.
This is
Paul.
And
I'm Adam.
Adam Holtz. Welcome, Adam, to the official Plugged In Vodcast.
Glad to be here.
Guys, we are going to be talking about Miley Cyrus because for some reason nobody talks about Miley Cyrus.
No one
it's
does.
ridiculous.
No. I
She's
never
so
see
under the
articles
radar.
about
So
Miley
under
at all
But
anymore.
somebody did.
Somebody
Claire did an interview with Miley Cyrus, and there was a really interesting quote.
Yep.
And I'm not going to quote the whole thing, but to paraphrase Miley Cyrus, the message version of Miley Cyrus, as done
I'm sure
by
Eugene Peterson would appreciate that.
was that Hannah Montana actually kind of scarred her as a character.
Yeah.
And it left her, she said, it left her at the end of the show not knowing who she was. And I had a bit of an emotional reaction to that because my wife and I, Truth Time, were big Hannah Montana show. The show, we were big fans of it.
Had the toothbrushes, backpacks, the whole bit.
Shh. I wasn't getting that much truth in there.
The ponchos.
But so I was thinking about it because the whole premise of the show is that here's Miley Cyrus playing Miley Stewart, who pretends to be Hannah Montana, and Miley Cyrus is Hannah Montana in real life, and so there was this sense for me
she goes on
watching
tour and changes costumes and is both of them.
Yeah, and she gets to be the pop star, and the whole show is she also gets to be a regular kid who lives in a regular house and has regular friends who have no idea who she is. And there was this part of me, even though I knew the show wasn't real, it seemed to acknowledge its own silliness. It seemed to be kind of self-aware. So there was this part of me that bought the idea that Miley Stewart was not that different from Miley Cyrus, that it was kind of a part of her personality that she was playing out there. But
that's who she was, really.
Right. She really was pretty close to Miley Stewart, her character in the show.
Mm-hmm.
But as she's let us all know in this Marie Claire article, that wasn't how she felt. She felt like the producers of the show, whoever the creators of the show, were forcing her to be someone who she wasn't, so that she was left not really knowing who she was.
Yeah.
And so it brings up the really important issue of identity.
Yeah.
And what shapes our identity, what is the driver behind it, especially in this culture where there's so many things telling us what our identity could be or should be.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's something we have to talk about, especially when we've got young kids.
Well, I think the great thing here is that it's a ready-made example of the fact that what you see on TV is not reality.
Right.
It's a fantasy. Mm-hmm. And turns out it was just as much a fantasy for Miley Cyrus as it was for her millions of fans, including Jake and his wife. It's not real, Jake. Miley's not real. Sorry.
I'm getting there.
But I think the process of figuring out who we are is an ongoing process, but it's an intense one for young people today. Yeah. And more so than ever before, I think there are all these images put in front of us that say, this is who you're supposed to be. This is who you're supposed to look like. We've seen some things recently, Paul, that say, teens who are on Facebook more often tend to be depressed, and researchers think that's because they see all of these idealized presentations of people putting on their best self, and they don't measure up, and they feel bad about themselves.
Yeah, I think that's really true. You have so many elements that go into modern day society where you are just being influenced everywhere. And I think that a lot of people, especially when you're kids, it's really easy to lose sight of who you are in the midst of all these pressures on who you want to be.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And that can be a really tricky thing for especially when you think of someone like Miley Cyrus growing up within this industry where there's so many pressures to be successful and there's so many people who are actually telling her who she needs to be.
Right.
Yeah.
That can be really tricky.
Yeah, because it used to be, it was your parents.
Right.
And it was maybe a pastor or a teacher. You had these couple, or a friend who helped mold you because they saw who you really were.
Right.
And they helped you see your strengths.
And we weren't looking at ourselves all the time on our machines.
Right. And so they helped you see who you were beyond these external things that social media seems to encourage us to put forth as our actual identity. Our parents and those close to us saw deeper things that they could encourage, and that can still happen. Parents, we see research shows parents still, when they put down their own phones, have that
you're
voice.
Close to home now, Jake.
I have to think about every day with my kids of putting down my own phone and saying to my child, like, I see this strength in you.
Yeah.
I see this gift that that God has given you, and I want to help you foster that.
Yeah.
And I want to help you grow in that. And it sounds like...
And then our flesh and blood relationship is
Right.
more important and more real than what's on the screen.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
And it sounds like what kind of happened to Miley, and not knowing the dynamics
Sure,
between her parents
sure.
at the time, obviously, but it sounds like, at those critical moments when she needed her parents there saying, hey, you're more than this. This is not who you are. She had producers telling her, you're not who you're supposed to be. Let's fix you up.
Right.
And that, I can imagine, would be really difficult. Certainly, she's in charge of her own decision-making now as an adult, but I can't imagine, being that teenager and having somebody else,
Right.
when I need somebody to reach deep inside and say, I see who you really are and what
Right.
you're really good at.
Right. Well, and when you think about it biblically, I mean, we're always supposed to be getting our identity not from all these outside influences, but from God, right? I mean, we should really be sort of letting go of these things as much as we can, and drawing our self-worth and our self-identity from a source higher than us.
Right.
But in today's world, it can be really tricky.
Well, it takes a lot of intentionality, and that might be a topic for another discussion because it's a big one.
Yeah.
But I think we have to be focused on what is true and how do we help each other and our children grow up being shaped by the right identity markers and not false ones.
Yeah, because the reality of the situation is even if your child is not the next Hannah Montana, which most of our kids are not, statistically speaking, the reality is that they are growing up in a society where culture is playing the role of that Hollywood producer, and
that's a great
for better or
point,
for worse.
Yep.
And so we have that same responsibility that we have to step into the midst of that and say, I see something more. I see something deeper. Let me encourage that. Let me push you there.
You bet.
Versus
And pull you there and hug you
pull you
there.
there and hug you there and love you there and kiss you there. It takes relationship.
Yeah.
And again, that doesn't happen when we're on our devices. So it's another good reminder of the fact that we have to be present. We have to be there in the moment. And because it's not just our kids have to be there in the moment, we have to be there in the moment.
Yeah.
And so that's a great place to jump off into a discussion as we talk about identity, as we talk about presence, as we talk about being there for our kids, for each other, for friends. Technology's role in all that. How do you help your kids with that? How do you help them navigate that? Or if you're a younger, and you're going through that right now, how do you set that aside and see who you really are? Because you are valuable. You are worth a lot to God and to the people around you. So how do you capture that in the midst of all the noise?
Yeah.
Tell
Great
us,
questions,
because
Jay.
this is great stuff to encourage others with, because we're all doing this thing together, really. And we can, and that's the cool
Right here,
thing,
right now.
right here, right now. And that's the cool thing about social media.
Yep.
Beyond that is we do have an opportunity to stop and say, hey, you're valuable, and here is how I want to encourage you that way.
Yep. Absolutely.
Good words.
So talk to us. Thanks for joining us here on the official Plugged In Vodcast. I'm Jake.
I'm Paul.
And I'm Adam.
Adam. We'll see you guys next time. Peace! Are you guys going to say peace too?
No.
Peace.
No.